This tutorial is going to be about how to create a table of contents in InDesign. And we're going to create something similar to this to work with picture boxes, text boxes, character styles, and so on. So we're going to start by making a new document, File New. And we're just going to have one page, so we don't have to worry about the adding number of pages. We don't have to worry about facing pages. And we're just going to keep it the standard 8.5 by 11. I'll add a bleed of 0.125 across the board. And I'm going to change my columns to 4, just so I have some guides as I'm starting to work with this layout. I'm going to press OK. And to keep everyone on the same page, I'm going to go up to my Essentials, and I'm just going to reset my Essentials palette. This is making sure that we all have the same playing field as we move forward. Now mine's linked to my Creative Cloud account, so that's why that popped up. But we can see over here on the right-hand side, we have our pages, which is only 1. We have our layers, again only 1. Nothing is linked. We have our stroke, color, swatches, and then if you have your library linked. On the left-hand side, we have our tools, and I'm going to just single click to create a 2-column layout. I just like to look at it this way. I think it's a little easier. And we're ready to start. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the center of my page. I always like to know where the center is so I can work off of that. And if you have your rulers up, and if you do not, Command R, which brings those rulers on the horizontal top and vertical left. And because mine is already set in inches, I can take mine to be 4.25, which is half of 8.5. Now, if you have picas up here, you might have to go to InDesign, Preferences, Units and Increments. From here, you can change your rulers to have inches on the horizontal and the vertical. So here I see my nice middle of the line, which I know how to center things. And I'm going to start with my text tool. I'm going to go over to that T, and I'm going to make a box across the top. And this is going to say content. Now it's important to know with a text box, the text has to fit in the box. So if I made a tiny little box and wanted to type in it, this word and this word would not fit. You would get a little red plus sign, which we'll be looking at later. I'm always going back to my selection tool. This is kind of home for me, and I'm going to open my character palette. And by default, I don't see it over here. So I'm going to go up to a window, type in tables, character, or Command T to bring up my characters. Now we're going to be using our character palette a lot, so I'm going to drag it over and kind of drop it into my side palette, so it's over there as well. Usually you can create your own setup that you feel most comfortable with, and I can pop that out as much as I want. While we're adding, over here I'm also going to be adding my paragraph palette, and again I'm going to drag it over here as well. So I like to work with those together. Okay, back to our character palette. So I'm over here and I'm going to change my font, and you can choose whatever font you want. And you can really play around with your typography at this point. So maybe I want this to be 60 points and large. Maybe if I want it to be all caps, I can go to the little hamburger in the top right. And this is what I'm talking about right here. Let's zoom in. So you can see here that my word is too long for this type box. So you get this little plus sign, and that means that it's overflowing. And we could continue this on another page, but it's one word, so we don't want to do that. So we have 2 choices. One, we can make our text smaller to make it fit, 2 points smaller, and it fit in there nicely. Or I could make the box larger. So when you get that red little plus sign, that's what's going on, and you can fix that accordingly. So there I have my content set. And sometimes when you're working, you're going to want to jump back and forth between preview and normal mode. And this kind of shows you everything without all the boxes, guides, grids. Kind of nice. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a box around my whole page as a kind of border. If you can see from over here, it just has a nice thin 0.25 border going around. So I'm going to make sure I can see my entire page by zooming in and out, Command plus, Command minus, very similar to Photoshop and Illustrator. And I'm going to come over here to my rectangle tool. This is a regular rectangle tool, just as it would be in Illustrator or Photoshop. We have a fill and a stroke over here that if we wanted to hit this default white, the white box with the red line through, which means none, and then the black border. So I have a nice black stroke with no fill. And I'm going to come over here and just use my margin as a 0.25 area. And I'm now going to go to my stroke palette, and I'm going to take this stroke from 1 point down to 0.25. So a nice thin rule. You can see that there. Now at this point I'm going to go to my layers palette, and I'm going to call this content and border. And I'm going to lock that layer for now. Whenever you make a box in InDesign and you try to put a text layer over it, it sometimes wants to put the text in that box. So to create no confusion, I'm going to lock that layer and make a new layer on top of that. All right, I'm going to go back to my guides and grids so I can see. And I'm going to now make a picture box. And this is going to be our main article. So it's going to be I'm going to make it a nice bigger box. It might be too big to make a square. Now this picture box made with the rectangle frame tool, we know that it's a picture box because it has that X in the middle of it. And from here, I can do File, Place, or Command D as the shortcut to place in an image of our choosing. And I'm going to use our images from another tutorial and place that image in. Now you can see right here that my image is larger than the square. So we have some options. So if I can go to Object Fitting and decide here how I want to actually fit this box in. Do I want to fill frame proportionally, fit content proportionally, fit frame to content, fit content to frame? Now what I'm going to do is fill frame proportionally, and I could also get to the same setting if I control click or right click with the mouse and go down to fitting, fit frame proportionally. And that's going to fit it in there nicely. All right, next up, I'm going to start with my page number, which I'm going to put over here on the left side, and then I'm going to put my article, title, and description on the right side. So I'm going to come over to my text box again, and I'm going to create a text box that's going to fit here and match up nicely with the bottom of my image and my gutter of my first column. So I'm using my grid. It's just not a random box. Whoops. Come back. There we go. And I'm just going to give a page number of 86. Now, what I'm going to do is come over to my character palette now, and I'm going to choose my font size. And I want this to be a big, bold font. So I'm going to choose a big, bold sans serif font. And I'm going to make it 72 points. So it's a nice, large 1 inch in height. And maybe I want to turn these a little bit closer together so they feel a little bit more as a system. And what I can do now is this is my page number. But you notice by default, my box is in the top of my text box. My text is in the top of my text box. I want to have it to the baseline, only because this is where I want it to line up. Now, I could do this and kind of wiggle it down and use my guides and do that, but why not use my box? So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to hit Command B on the keyboard, which is going to give my text frame options. Now, if you're on a PC, you might have to do, let's see here, text frame, here we go, object text frame options. But using the shortcuts is really going to save you a lot of time and by using them. So if I hit Command B, and I'm just going to change my vertical justification from top to bottom. And by doing that, it moves to the bottom of my text box. That really helps. So I'm just going to snug this over just so it's a little bit, and we could always use our paragraph alignment here to go on the right side if we wanted to horizontally align that as well. All right, so that is good. And we could use our guides to really double check that everything's lined up nicely. And get in there, and we can probably make this a tiny bit higher. There we go. All right, now let's go over to our other side. And I'm going to make a text box over here. And I'm going to make it basically 3/4 of this grid. I don't want to have it go all the way to our border because then it's going to get touchy and create a point of tension. So this is going to be the headline. So I'm just going to put the Happy Film Preview and then a short yet interesting description. So I put my text in, and copying and pasting is fine as well. And now I want to set these two as my headline. And this is going to get easier because we're going to create style sheets after we finish these two. And it's going to make all the rest of our headlines go super smooth and fast. So here what I'm going to do is change this again. And I'm going to, I always spell that, the font I went wrong. And I'm going to make it my font. That's a bold font. I'm going to keep it the 12 point, but I'm going to change it to all caps. And I'm going to choose a color for this. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to choose this hot pink or magenta. Come back to my character palette. Maybe I want to bring my tracking in a little bit so it's a little tighter. And make my leading a little bit less. And then down below here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to choose my font. I'm going to make my font size 9 points, nice and small. This is a really tiny description. I think you can even go down to 8. And again, I'm going to, if I wanted to change my leading, and I'm going to make it a little bit further apart. So now what we have set is we've set our page number, our headline, and our description. Now what I'm going to use is my character styles to save these 3 styles so I can reuse them throughout this page without having to go back to the character palette and reset. This is a real time saver. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to go to my styles and character styles. I'm going to take this palette and I'm going to put it right in here. So it's nice and saved. And now I can break that out. So when you open this character styles, you can see it says none because we do not have any character styles saved yet. And we can look at this, and here we can see that this is how you can make a new style. This is how you could create a folder of saved styles. And let's come out here and get started. So I'm going to come over here to my 86, my page number, and I'm going to come down here and hit that new style button. And by default, it's going to say character style 1. If I double click on that, I can rename this. I'm going to rename this style page number. Now take a look here of what you see. this is everything it is saving in this page style. So it's saving the Arial bold, the font size, and the tracking of -30. That's exactly what I want for all my page numbers. So I'm going to keep that and say okay. Now I'm going to come over here to my article name, and I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to come over here and say again, new style. Again, double click on character style 1 and call this article. Now this has a little bit more. It has the name of the font, bold, the leading of 11 points, tracking of -10, and then the color it's saving with it. So it's saving that 100% magenta plus all caps. And say okay. And finally, I'm going to save this last one and just call this description. Amazing. Now, let's say I went back and I decided after I have saved this that I want this to be cyan and not to be magenta. I can double click on the article in the character styles and go through all my different basic character formats, advanced character formats, or character color and change it to be cyan. And this would change all my fonts throughout my multi-page publication, or in this case, a single article name. Can really be a time saver. So now my character styles are saved. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to make a horizontal rule to just kind of break this up a little bit. And these are going to be a little bit asymmetrical just to add a little interest. So I'm just using that line tool to create a line. I'm going to go to my stroke, and here you can see that you can make this a thicker line. You could make it a thick and thin line and really have some fun with the line. After I make that line, now I'm going to make another thin picture box underneath. Oops, and I want to go back to my preview so I can see a little bit better where to begin. Just like that. That looks great. I'm going to file, place in another image. I'm going to control click, and I'm going to go down to fitting, fit frame proportionally. And that picture fits in there quite nice. Now for this one, I'm going to kind of go back and forth and put page numbers on one side and then page numbers on the other to kind of just move your eye in a zigzag down the page. So I'm going to use my text tool and come over to the side and create another page number. In this case, I'll just do 72. Numbers are obviously not important. I can come now over to my character styles and I can hit my page number and it's automatically going to change the font to our saved character style. Really big time saver. I'm going to have to move the baseline down, so I'm going to Command B and do that same vertical justification to bottom and say OK. I'm going to move this over to align nicely with my grid. There we go. Perfect. Now on the other side, I'm going to put the name of my article and a description. Now, unlike the one on this side, I'm going to make sure this is right aligned so it butts up to this image nicely. So here I'm going to do the title and then the short description. Now, same as over here, I can select the title and hit article, and I can hit description and hit description. Really big time saver. Command B and vertical justification to the bottom. To right align my text. Now notice that this will be all left aligned on this side, and then this side the articles and descriptions will be right aligned. And you can see how this is going to pan out. All right, we're going to repeat this step again. So I'm going to move this line down because this is going to be my divider. And I'm going to make another picture box. I'm just getting a little repetition with using these tools. And I'm going to place in another one, Command D. And I'm going to fit this to that. And I'm going to do this again. So here on this side, I'm going to make a picture box and type our number in. Use my character styles, page number. And notice again, I got that red box. That means my box isn't big enough. So I'm going to go back to my selection tool and just make my box a little bit bigger. There we go. Now to align this, I'm going to use my paragraph palette to right align to the right side of the picture box, and then Command B to move my vertical justification to the bottom again. Really kind of nice. And I would keep doing this down the page. I'm going to come over here and show you one more thing from my finished product. So at the end I had 3 smaller ones and 1 big page at the top. Now one thing you might want to think about is creating a color scheme. And a nice way to create a color scheme that's maybe not just black and cyan or black and red is to use the color theme tool. And this is a newer tool in CC 2015. So if I click this tool and I click on an image within, this is almost how color.adobe works. It's really nice. And I click on the image, it's going to make a color scheme based on that image. So I come over here. Let's go back and try it again. This is going to be a little darker one, and so on and so forth. So these are nice because then what I can do, I'm going to go back to that last color scheme because that was a little bit nicer than this one. I'm going to come over here and you can see that I could either save it to my swatches or upload it to my CC library. So if you don't have a CC library, that's fine. You can just save this to your swatches by clicking that button, coming over to your swatches palette, and if I scroll down here, you can see that I have that color palette and it's all saved CMYK and ready to use for my document. Now finally, I'm going to save this as a PDF. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to do File, PDF Presets. And there's a lot of different PDFs for different versions of Acrobat. In our case, we're just going to work with the best high quality print. When I press that, it's going to ask where I want to save it. I'm going to save it with my INDD. It's going to ask you some questions. For the most part, we don't have to worry about this, except for we might want to save it instead of individual pages as spreads when you're printing multi-page spreads. You can create thumbnails in PowerPoint. If you have hyperlinks in, you want to check that. If you have interactive elements, you might want to do that. Compressions and bleeds. So maybe you want some printer marks. This is going to do your crop marks, bleed marks, registration marks. And I usually definitely like the crop marks and the bleed marks. And I just want a really thin line. So I would usually put 0.125. After I set all that, I'm going to press export. Mine opens up automatically, and you can see now here's my PDF. It has the crop marks here, so I know where the 8.5 by 11 line is. I could use my X-Acto knife to cut that nicely, and I have my marks. So after I check this print, I'm going to go back and save this as an INDD. Now remember, when you're saving this as an INDD, if you have an older version of InDesign, or maybe you know the printer has an older version of InDesign, you might want to save it as an IDML. This is going to open in CS4 or later. I usually save it as both if I don't know the answer. And hit save.